Hi friends, this is class 10's second part of ICSE syllabus, and this is the normal syllabus. This is not the reduced syllabus, because I want to discuss with you the concepts which are part of the syllabus usually. So in this part we are going to take a look at what you are expected to know in part 2 of the syllabus. This is a syllabus which is titled Theory of Demand and Supply. Okay, now three keywords: theory, demand, supply. We'll just discuss what it is, but what the syllabus says, let's see this. First thing it says, you have to know meaning and concept of demand and supply. So you have to know meaning and concept. Okay, we'll come back to it, don't you worry, of demand and supply. Okay, under this there are many things. Now see, this is going to be very vital, so please do not skip parts of the chapter. I suggest you read this chapter thoroughly, because demand and supply, ultimately this is what economics is all about. If you think it think about economics properly, because everything is based on demand and supply. So here you have to study, what the syllabus has is, you have to study law of demand and supply. Okay, law of demand, I'm putting demand like this, and supply. Okay, so but you don't write this, you say demand and supply. Okay, put it this way. Let me just put this away. So law of demand and supply, and you also have to know demand and supply schedule. See, this is also important: demand and supply schedule. Now what is a schedule? Of course, when you'll go through the chapter, you will realize that schedule is actually a sort of table. Okay, it's a sort of table which explains to you, you know uh, say, the relation which is existing between, cost and the buyer and the seller, how they are actually behaving at different costs of a commodity, or different price. Let's put price, this is a better word. At different prices, as the prices rise or fall, what is the behavior of a buyer or a seller? That is where, the demand and supply interact, and we will learn more about this in this part of the syllabus. Let's move on. What else we have? We have, this schedule we have to know, and curve. Okay, there is, along with this schedule, there is also curve, that is, you draw it. Okay, taking into consideration the demand of a particular commodity with respect to the change in price. Also, when you have curve, you have to know curve of two types. One is individual. Okay, individual demand curve, and you have to know market demand curve. These are two important words here. Okay, and with this we have to know movement and shift of the demand and supply curve. This means, if there are curves, I'm just drawing something like this. If there are, demand and supply curves, there are two things which happen. What happen? We'll go into detail of all of it when we go into the chapter in later videos. But what you have to know here is, you have to know the movement and shift of the, see, there are two words. There can be movement and there can be shift. Okay, shift of the demand and supply curve, of the demand and supply curve. Okay, this is also we have got to study here. Next point we have to study here is determinants of demand and supply. Determinants. Okay, determinants of demand and supply, this we have to study here. And then the last point here is exceptions to the law of demand. You have to study exceptions. Exceptions means here is that what are those things, what are those particular uh, what do you call examples where law of demand is not applicable, exceptions to the law of demand. Let's see, there is more to it, so we have to be careful in knowing that what all is here. Okay, so we have exceptions to the law of demand. Then we have to study meaning of demand and supply, the concept of demand, types of demand. So that means you have to study demand in detail. Okay, this is demand, you have to study a lot of things here, meaning of demand and supply. Let me put supply also here. These are the two words, the concept of demand, types of demand, and concept of supply to be explained with examples. So we have to know these as concepts, okay, and examples, very important here. Okay, and then we have to have a basic understanding of the law of demand and supply, in which demand and supply schedules to be used to explain the demand uh, and supply curves. Okay, so if I tell you, like, the syllabus says that you have to know these two concepts thoroughly. You have to know the graph, you have to know the curve, you have to know how to draw the individual and the market curves. So the individual demand and supply curves must be distinguished, the syllabus says, from market demand and supply curves. Okay, so you have to know all of it. Next is concept of movement and shift of demand and supply curves are to be explained. So as I said earlier, there is a movement and there is a shift of demand curve. There is a movement along demand curve, and there is a movement and shift of demand and supply curve. So movement, that keywords you have here is movement and shift, so keep these two in mind. Of course you will study this in detail, so this is just the very basic discussion on the syllabus. And determinants of demand and supply are to be specified, that is what the syllabus has asked for, and exceptions to the law of demand are to be discussed. So this is all under, if you see, the first part, that is demand and supply. So if I put it in a way, in a very simple way, you have to study demand and supply thoroughly. Now the second part to this theory of demand and supply, which we have to know, is it's a term called, I'll just write it for you. This is elasticity of demand and elasticity of supply. So the term is elasticity, okay, of demand and supply. Okay, don't you worry, this is something slightly mathematical, but you will get to know this once you read this. So here also we have to know meaning, types, percentage, method of measuring elasticity. Now see, when it comes to measurement, this means this is mathematical, that means you have to learn certain maths here, so you have to know meaning. Okay, meaning, and with meaning you have to know types, you know types, percentage, method of measuring elasticity. So there's meaning, there are types, and percentage method of measuring elasticity. Okay, percentage method of measuring means, again, see, there's maths, measuring what? Elasticity. Elasticity of what? Elasticity of demand and elasticity of supply. Okay, elasticity of demand and elasticity of supply, and factors affecting elasticity of demand and supply. So you have to see factors affecting. Okay, affecting what? Affecting uh, elasticity. Okay, this is important. And the syllabus also mentions that the concept of price elasticity of demand and elasticity of supply are to be explained with percentage method. So factors affecting the elasticity of demand and supply are to be specified. Numerical problems are not for testing. Okay, so numerical problems are not for testing. Numerical probs not for testing. So I've just put across. So see, more of it we will understand once we go back to the syllabus. And let me just touch upon all that we just discussed under this part of the syllabus. So this part of the syllabus, see, the first part we had discussed earlier in the earlier video was the productive mechanism, where we discussed land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. And here is number 2 or part 2 of the syllabus as taught or as prescribed uh, in ICSE syllabus. So you have to study theory of demand and supply. Now this can be as good a syllabus for any other board, but I am just picking as it's mentioned for this particular board. But anyway, if you're studying economics, I think you should know this at 10th standard anyway. So theory of demand and supply, meaning, concept, what is demand, what is supply, then we have to know what you call, you have to know demand supply schedule, the table, where we also, after drawing the schedule, we will also learn the demand and supply curve. As I have mentioned here, this is, we have to know demand supply curve. This is for individuals and this is for the market. Okay, two keywords you have to know as you learn how to plot demand supply curves is the movement and the shift, you know of the curve, the shift of the curve or the movement along the curve. So we will learn demand and supply here, determinants of demand and supply, and what are exceptions, what are those examples which are exception to this demand law of demand. Then you have to know demand supply as concepts, number 1, and you have to know it with examples. Again, I have mentioned here movement and shift. And the second point you have to know here under this demand supply is elasticity. This is interesting. That is, elasticity, as the word may be giving you an idea, is change, in some kind of value or value of a variable. So elasticity of demand and supply. What is the meaning of elasticity? What are types? Percentage method of measuring elasticity. This is here mentioned in your syllabus, but it also says that numerical problems are not for testing, and factors which are affecting elasticity. So this is all you need to study under theory of demand and supply in class 10 as per ICSE syllabus. If you like it, please subscribe the channel, or you may please share the video. Thanks for watching.